We got the seats back from the upholsterist, and they turned out pretty good, pretty nice. This thermal foam is pretty stiff, so it doesn't move very good, so there's not much give to it. It takes a while to get any give to it, so we're not going to get much on the folding seat back there to fold it forward. And it's kind of a pain to get the pins in and out of it and stuff to get the seat attached, but we got it figured out and it works. Front seat, it turned out real nice. The seat back fits on there real nice, and the seat bottom, I had to do a little bit of trimming on the foam where these ears go on the seat bottom, the brace, but we got it to fit in there real nice, got snaps in it and all snapped in. So these will all come out now and get put away for a little while. I had the radios mounted in there, running the wiring harness for the radios for a little bit, and got it lined up. Fortunately, I was worried that I might have to reduce the wiring harness a little bit since the fuselage is wider there than the other fuselage, but there's plenty of wire for everything. The jacks for the headsets for the rear seat are just long enough, and of course for the front seat are plenty long enough. They were more than long enough before, so anyway, there was enough of the wiring harness there that everything fits in there pretty good. So I pulled the radios out so I could fit in the circuit breakers and the switches for the different things, and kind of get an idea of those, and get the wires run for those, or laid out for them anyway. I wasn't very happy with the way this wiring harness for the radios was. It's kind of a mess. There's too much wire for some of these things, and it's all bundled up here and tied up, and anyway, it's just kind of a mess. And I was thinking about redoing all that, although there's really no practical reason to redo it because it all still functions perfectly fine. But I just didn't like the way that it's laid out here. It runs out these bundles and they're tight, and anyway, it's just, like I said, just a mess. I had some pins for the jacks for the radios, and I thought maybe I could redo some of these, but the pins are all female pins, and the only jack they fit in was one jack on the back of the comm radio, the aircraft comm radio. This is the jack for the comm radio that goes in for the power and stuff. I couldn't pull the pin out for that RS-232 input. I just cut the wire off short there, and if we ever need it, they can get a puller and a tool and pull that pin out and redo it. I redid this harness. I put some shrink wrap on it and stuff in here, and put a little bit of RTV in the hole so it supports that wiring harness back there where it goes into this jack a little better, and keeps the bugs from going in there, maybe. But I did put a pin in there and a wire in there for an RS-232 output. That was this wire here that goes back to the ELT. So it sends signal back to the ELT, and the ELT holds that signal. It refreshes every so often and it holds it in memory. So it'll transmit the GPS coordinates over the ELT signal in case we ever have to use that, which hopefully will be never. But anyway, this I run this cable, this 3-wire shielded cable, and it's just a 24 gauge cable, and run it back. We've got 3 wires on it, plus the shield, shield here, and we've got 1 wire that goes to power source in the panel. I'll put a 1 amp circuit breaker in there for that. This goes to the chassis ground, aircraft ground, and then the white wire is the data. It goes back to a plug. Now this one went pretty easy. Hardest part on this end was stripping the cover off the cable here, the plastic off the cable. I had to cut it all the way, being real careful not to cut into any of the wires. Of course, the shield on there protects it, and it got nicked a little bit in a couple spots, but not too bad. And once I peeled off a goodly section of the cover, then I pushed the shield back on it until I was able to get some slack in it, and took a little probe, dental pick, in there and opened up a hole in it and pulled one of the wires, worked one of the wires until I was able to get it out. And then once I did, then the other two wires came out pretty easy. So that way I've got a nice run here of the shield that I can run to ground on this end, and then the wires we can run independently of each other because they go to different places. So that other one on the ELT end of it was a real pain. It's just got little jack on it that had 4 pins in it, 4 plugs in it, and the little teeny pins on it that you're supposed to solder these wires to. So there's no mechanical connection to the wires. They're just soldered onto the pins, so they're not a very good connection, and they're real tiny and small and hard to see for me anymore. But I got those all put on there and sealed up real good so we can, and I tested all the wires. I got my ohm meter out and tested all the wires so they all go where they're supposed to and they all make connection and stuff. So that all turned out okay. So that wire is run. This will be run up underneath the instrument panel here, out up the door post, and then up through the wing root and then back to the ELT back there. This cable here is just basically a phone wire, and it goes to the annunciator panel for the ELT. It was in the left-hand wing root on the other airframe. I'm going to put it in the right-hand wing root here and run it right with this cable here, and we'll run it in the wing root and then over the top of the rear baggage compartment and back into over the top of the baggage compartment and then back into the rear baggage compartment to the ELT. So I'm laying out some of the other wires for all the other different things besides the avionics, and one of the things that I was laying out was the wiring to go back to the tail for the beacon and the aft position light, nav light. And those wires that I had for that, of course the back end of them were pretty dirty and there's a little bit of corrosion in on the wires where they came in because they sit back in the salt water quite a bit. They'd also been cut a couple times and were spliced in a couple places, and that's okay for repair, but since we're fixing this airplane all up, I hate to put spliced wires in there. So I was going to run new wires in, and I figured I'd run 2 wire with ground back there, and that way both wires for the beacon and the nav light would all be in one bundle, one cable, and then I'd run it shielded on it, which theoretically would help prevent some of the noise on the beacon and the nav light maybe. But what it really does is it gives me a continuous ground path from back there in the tail up here to my ground. Ordinarily what I did before on it, and ordinarily what you do is just run the 2 wires back there and then run the ground off from the rudder into the aft portion of the airplane and make a ground point back there. And we still might have a ground point back there, I don't know, we'll see. But what happens is that's back there in the tail end of the airplane where it's damp all the time, and that gets just another sore spot for corrosion. So I thought I'd run shielded wire there, and that way I only need to run 2 conductors, and then the shield on here can act as a ground. I had lots of different kinds of wire, but all of it is 20 gauge or 24 gauge, and I needed at least 18 gauge for those nav lights and the beacon. So I ordered some wire, and that came yesterday, and I got that cable run now, routing it down the fuselage. I just cut off here on the front. I'll put terminals on those wires. I run a new wire for the fuel pump back there. I could have run the old wire on it, and it was in pretty good shape, but it did have a couple splices in it. So I got some 14 gauge wire and run a wire for it, and I did the same thing with the wires for the starter and the master switch, and I run those in 14 gauge too. They just had 18 gauge in them, which seems kind of light to me. 16 gauge would have been better, but 14 gauge is going to have plenty of capacity for those. And I have this sleeving and stuff we got from Boeing surplus years ago. I run those and made a bundle out of them. I also got a new cable, just came to run an 8 gauge wire from the panel over to the shunt for the ammeter that'll go back to the battery, and I'm going to run a new wire, 8 gauge wire, up to the alternator too. That one had pretty dirty, grungy, had a few wear spots in the insulation. Didn't wear through, but it had a few wear spots in the insulation and stuff on it, so I'm just going to run a new wire on that. This is what I've got so far. This is a wire going back to the tail for the beacon and the nav light, and I've got Adel clamps, AN 742, and I think this is like a 10 here, and then a cushion clamp for the wire to be put in onto these tubes and have it run back here to the tail. In places where it runs in where it might chafe here, I've put a little bit of that sleeving on it, which is probably unnecessary, but I did it anyway. This is where the wire going to the fuel pump comes in, and it'll split off from here. I'll put another clamp right here on this tray for the baggage compartment floor and then run that down to the fuel pump. Then it comes up here and it'll all go into one bundle here. I've got this loosely connected here right now with a clamp with just the battery cable here. Well, this little cable here is the push to talk switch cable for the pilot seat, and we got a big cable underneath there that goes to the starter. That'll come out there too. I've got to do a little modification on the floor there to get that stuff through there. We'll route all this up here, bundle it up and tie it on there. Okay, I've got this main cable bundle going to the battery kind of laid out here. Got the cable clamps on it, and this will be the main cable that goes from the starter solenoid to the starter, and then this is the main battery cable, goes from the master solenoid up to the switch and then to the alternator. This little bundle here has a cable in it going to the master switch for starting, onto the starter for the starting switch, and then it also has a cable in it going to the fuel pump, and that splits off down here at the bottom of this run. This is the push to talk switch wire here, but I've got the standoffs on it here. Had to make a little relief down here in the floor to get that to go through the floorboards, but that's run down through there now. Now I try to figure out how to run it up into the battery. There's the battery box over there. Just got it sitting in there and a couple of screws in the holes to hold it. It's not bolted down. I'm just trying to figure out how to lay this out, to figure out where to run my wires. I had them running coming up through this cutout here for the seat, where the bolts go in the seat. That's not quite big enough for all that cable bundle. It kind of rubs on that bolt to hold the seat down and make it hard to get the seat in and out. So I'll probably wind up cutting a hole in here someplace in the floorboard. Well, the rest of this wiring looks like an explosion in a spaghetti factory, and I haven't even got the wiring for the engine compartment in there yet. This is the wires here. This will go back to the tail for the aft position light and the beacon, and this is the wires for the starter and master switch, as well as the fuel pump. Those are going back there, and then they tie in to the cable going to the battery, the main bus cable going to the battery right there. That's the ammeter shunt, and they come down, and we've got the push to talk switch, pilot push to talk switch coming down from up on the wing root, and it goes down, ties into this bundle, and then they've got the main battery cable for the starter tying into it here. Plenty of room as it goes by these fuel lines, and tied in pretty good. I put a little bit of friction tape around the tubes here so those clamps that hold tight on there. They're metal to metal clamps, but those will hold tight there. So here's where it goes on down, and then this is where the split for the back goes. We've got the wire in the green sheath going for the fuel pump, and then the other one going for the aft position light and beacon. I relieved out a little bit of the floorboards there for that wire bundle to go down underneath there. Put a little bit of anti-chafe around that, and then got a clamp underneath the floor right there to hold it up, and a second clamp over here where it comes out, and another little hole there for it coming out. That's where everything exits underneath the seat right there. I will have a hole right here. I'm going to put a the ground right there. I put a big wire in there for the ground. I got my wiring harness fairly well straightened out. At least it's a lot better than it was. I've still got the antenna cables to tie down and stuff, but most of the worst of it is all done. This is all the communication stuff here. It's all bundled up a lot neater than it was, routed, and then I've got all the power stuff coming down below, and I've got them on standoffs with these cushion clamps. Everything's tied in real good. I've got it coming all the way forward. It'll be along the back of the firewall to keep everything away from the instrument panel and hopefully keep as much magnetic flux away from the magnetic compass as possible. Because of the way it's routed and because of the wider instrument panel, the landing light cables wound up being a little bit short. They're 10 gauge cables, and they just didn't quite make it up to the wing root. So I've got a piece of 10 gauge cable here. I could have cut and spliced them to make them longer, but I don't like putting splices in new wiring runs. They're going to be a splice up there in the wing root where it goes, it connects into the wing wiring harness anyway. Oh, I don't want another splice in there. I just had to order some 10 gauge wire. Once I get it, then it'd just be a simple matter of clipping these tie wraps on here and running that cable up through there. Now it runs down in this lower bundle, and the lower bundle turns and goes down the sidewall and down to the battery, and then here in the middle I've got it splitting off there and running up to the upper bundle, and then up to the window post and up to the wing root. This is for the oil temperature and oil pressure probes. They get that little 20 gauge wire on there, and it had gone through and fine before, but just worried all the wear and tear on it going through the firewall and out in the engine compartment. So I cleaned those up, put a little bit of heat shrink on them where they exposed and where they run through the firewall. I've got this shield on them here to help protect them from abrasion. The mag wires were plenty long enough, and then these wires go to the voltage regulator and the capacitor, and they're plenty long enough. I ran the old battery cable from the battery to the ammeter shunt. That ran fine. It was actually way too long, and I cut it off down there where the new battery box is going to be. And then I had to run a new cable from the ammeter shunt over to the control panel. That's where it's going to be, circuit breaker over here. And then because of the extra runs, I think the old cable that went to the alternator probably would have been long enough, but it was short anyway. The cables going to the alternator were just barely long enough. They were pretty tight in their hookup, and that's not real good. It doesn't give them any cushion for vibration or anything. So I had enough wire, so I went ahead and laid out the wire. We'll run a new wire up to the alternator. The wire had several splices in it going back to the beacon in the aft nav light on the tail. So I got a new cable to run back there. Because of the way this is routed again, just like with the landing lights, the wire for the left nav light wound up being just a little bit short. So I was going to use a piece of the old beacon wire. It was plenty long enough between splices to run in here to run a new wire up there. But when I got to stripping that out to use it, it was tarnished. So it must have had moisture wick up through the wire, and no matter where I cut it and stripped it back to try to make a connection, it was tarnished. So I got a new wire for that and ran over to the left side, and then I used the old left wire. It had a splice on it, and I cut it and I used it to run up into the right wing root for the right wing nav light. Everything is pretty well laid out. It's a lot nicer than it was. I still need to put in the wires for the EGT and the cylinder head temperature, and for the Hobbs meter, and the plug in the cable for the turn coordinator. Kept them forward here against the firewall again to keep it as far away from the instrument panel as possible to avoid inducing any magnetic current around the compass, and also it gives me room. I've got defroster kit that taps off of the heater where it comes out of the firewall, and it has two hoses that come up in a yoke up to the bottom of the windshield. So this will give me plenty of room to run those hoses up for the defroster in there. And it's a nice clean setup, not near as jumbled as it used to be.